Race recce's, great question. This, how important are they? I think it's one of those things that if you can, why wouldn't you? But if you can't, don't stress as much as you might worry that you can't do it. The big issue with most race recce's for a lot of people is if you're swimming overseas, you're not going to go overseas to recce the route most of the time. However, there's more novel ways than most people realize to do these. There are a lot of GPS things, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of data out there these days that you can easily look at these races and see, directions, tides, winds, what were the last few years' events, sort of race results look like, average speeds, those type of things. Lots of people these days are doing video blogs of some of their races or stuff like that. So if you can, great. If you can get there in person and swim some of these routes, great. Mainly because it gives you that ability to sight and plan your routes. So I've done some regular races over the years in the UK in lakes where you could go up the day before and have a little swim. You don't have to swim that far, but you go, okay, actually, that first buoy, I'm not going to see with 500 people in front of me, but there's a massive tree on the hill. That's my first sighting point. When we've turned around the buoy and I'm looking, actually, it's the third house on the left of the hill is my next sighting point. It's that knowledge dispels fear sort of attitude sometimes of just, if I can get some sort of ability and exposure to understand the route, it's probably going to take away fears on the day. If you can swim some of that route and you go, okay, that doesn't look that far from that point to that point, but it's bloody long because it's against the tide or there's a headwind. So don't stress if what I thought was 10 minutes is 18 minutes because I know it's coming. But likewise, as I say, a little bit of laptop work at home, and often people have already given, this info's out there. People have already been sharing this type of info anyway online, so it's not the end of the world if you can't get there. Any tips for improving my sighting and navigation? Yes, absolutely. And this sounds really sort of flippant of me, but you've just got to practice it. I think the big problem I see, particularly when people transition, good solid pool swimmers transition to the open water and they just realize, shit, there's no lane ropes. There's no markings on the bottom of the sea. And I remember swimming with a guy once, really, really good swimmer. But we used to call him Zorro because he literally zigzagged everywhere. And to the point that a couple of times in Dover, he beached himself on the beach because he just could not sight and swim properly in a straight line. So he found that he almost had to lift his head and sight practically every other stroke because he just could not get his bearings that he wasn't swimming straight. You can definitely practice that in the pool. And the way I always get people to do it in the pool, as long as the pool's conducive as far as number of people in the pool and stuff, is to swim with your eyes closed. Push off from the edge, do 5-10 strokes with your eyes closed, and just look up, see where you are. Likewise, you can do the same in the sea. Stop, swim in the shallows where you can stand up, do 5-10 strokes, and look to see how offline from your target you are. And then you can adjust and train. Am I pulling left? Am I pulling right? Is it that I'm dead straight for whatever? Am I dead straight for 5 strokes, but off over 10? I lose the ability after that. So use all that. Use what I said on the last point about picking reference points and being very solid with them. Don't make that reference point too far or too small. If you've got a massive pier, like in that picture there, aim for the middle of the pier rather than one specific bench on the pier, for example. But practice it in the water. Be quite humble with it. It's okay to be rubbish at it. You're going to get better in time. And even when you're better at it, you normally need to keep practicing it. But it's often the Achilles heel for many swimmers who just sort of don't observe this as a potential, not only a problem, but it's a potential strength. If you can get this right, you normally have a big advantage over lots who might be better swimmers, but can't get it right. When should I or do I need to get in the open water versus transitioning from the pool? it's the ultimate. It depends. It depends when your event is. So if your event is early season and the water temperature is going to be colder, you need to get in as early as you can. I wouldn't put a date or a month on it. I've just trained someone now, just been coaching someone who's been doing the ice championships, the ice swimming championships, and that was in Jan, in a 50-meter Lido, which I think the temps are like, they have to be below 5, I think, for them to be classed as a valid temp. So we've been in open water, even for 5 or 10 minutes, right through the winter. Obviously, that brings in safety and management and other issues of how we do that. But if you've got a September open water event, when it's probably going to be a balmy 14, 15, 16 degrees, you might not need to get in till May or June, because it's still okay at that point. What I've always felt is that the earlier you can get in, it just makes everything easier. So if you've managed to get in 6 or 7 degrees, 16 feels like a bathtub. But if you've got in at 10, 11, 12, 16 will still feel okay, but it won't feel the same as if you've got a better acclimatization. The difficulty often is access. You know, if you've got a 45-minute round trip to open water, you'll be smart when you introduce that because of the cost of getting there, etc. But also then the bit where there's an overlap between, I'm not ready in the open water to get a volume of swimming that's beneficial as a swim session versus my pool session. So I have to go to the pool to do my big sets, but I want to get in cold water. So often for me, then I'll just say to someone, look, you know, if you've got a lake or the sea, I'm lucky here, we've got miles of coastline within about 5 minutes of the house. So I might say to someone, look, take the dog down the beach for a walk as a family and just jump in for 5 minutes. Even if you just immerse yourself and don't swim, or just do a bit of breaststroke, it's worth it for now just to feel the water alongside your pool swimming. But if you haven't and you can't, doesn't matter. Or we come back to that conversation we had about the ice baths or the cold water baths and stuff, and using them as a modality. How long or far should my longest swim be? We had this conversation with Lawrence effectively. Depends on you, your event, and everything else. As a general rule, and I would give this advice to to cyclists, triathletes, runners, the same for their events. The longer your event, the shorter percentage of that event your long swim should be. So if I've got someone swimming for a 40-mile swim, I'm probably not going to get them to do more than 30, 40% of that event as a one-off training swim or event that replicates it. But if someone's doing a 10K swim, we might be 75, 80% of that event. We might even go 100% for that one. 5K or below might well do a 100% swim. So there's no magic number for it. In a similar way, if you think of running a marathon, some people do 16 miles as the longest, some people do 22 miles. Most people are around 18 to 20. You go to an ultra marathon and people tend not to double those numbers, even though it might be a 50-mile race. So the longer the race, the less percentage of your total swim distance needs to be your longest swim per se. Number one tip for a novice is just get in the water. There's a lot of theory behind this, and we've just talked for 4 hours about it now, but you just got to get in and you've got to get used to it. You've got to get used to the difference between pool and open water. As much as it's liberating and you feel that sense of freedom and aliveness of being in open water, I still get my moments where I shit myself in open water. I get my moments where I'm like, is that a piano playing and is that a shark underneath me? And you just have to, expel those fears by just repetition. So, and then of course, which I guess should have been my number one tip, is the safety side of it. Don't go, there's a lot of really good organizations now, from the RLSS to individual swim clubs and stuff, where they've got a lot of do's and don'ts lists. And I think they're vital, swimming alone, not telling people where you're going, not learning to read the tides or understand the tides, having effective strategies. There's a real art to the preparation to and preparation from open water swimming. Little things like leaving, when you're drying and putting your kit on, leaving your swim hat on, even though it's piss wet through, is massive for retaining some heat in your head. And then when you're dressed, whip that off and you put your big bobbly hat on. Those little things are the tricks of the trades that the experts and the sort of established people will often share with you. But they make a huge difference in your quality and health around open water swimming. So really manage your do's and don'ts, and